Hey, what's going on, Jam fam? So it's been a little while since my last video, at least like 2 weeks or something like that. But while I was gone, a new brawler came out and their name is Meeple. Now, I picked Meeple up out of the pizza shop and pushed them up a little bit. And today I just wanted to talk about my thoughts while I was pushing up this brawler. The real quick TDLR of this brawler is that I think they're just kind of a brawler on the roster that exists. They're not like super flashy. They're not super fun. They're not overly aggressive. So people aren't really going to be like excited to pick them up. And they're very easy to get countered. So this brawler is just kind of there. I don't really see what the point of this brawler is, but I do want to talk about like some of the things I like about them, some of the things that I would change, and like basically like, I don't know, complain about them a little bit because again, I don't think it's a great brawler. So if you want to stick around and listen to that, that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's just jump right into it.
Brains before brawl.
All right, so let's kick things off with my favorite thing about Meeple, and that's going to be their main attack. Now, don't get me wrong, this main attack is just okay. It's very far from being good, and at times, it's actually a pain in the ass to play around. So it's not great, and there's a couple of things that they can do to fix it, but we're going to talk about that stuff at the end of the video. Let's just break down the basic stuff really quick. All right, so if you don't know, Meeple does 2,600 damage on a single shot for their main attack, and in my opinion, for a single shot brawler, this is a very low amount of damage, but it can be boosted up to 3,200 damage if you use their Do Not Pass Go star power, which is a little bit better. All right, so I will point out that it is nice to get a little damage buff on a star power. I do not think that it is a good fix for Meeple's low damage because, like I said, it's only active when your super is up and you shoot through walls. So, you know, if a brawler isn't able to be targeted through the wall, you're not going to get the damage buff. And when your super is not up, you're not going to get the damage buff. So you're kind of just stuck as like a low damage, short range sniper, and it doesn't feel good. Meeple feels like a detriment to his team with his low damage, and I'm not a big fan of this overall. I like the main attack, but the low damage is a big problem in my opinion. However, Meeple does have a nice mechanic on their main attack, and that's going to be the fact that their projectile homes in on enemies just a little bit. It's kind of like Piper's homemade recipe gadget, but not quite as aggressive as that. And this is my favorite thing about Meeple's entire kit, because if you've ever watched one of my streams, you know that I am famous for missing shots by like a hair, and then I complain about it, and Meeple kind of just fixes that problem for me. They just take over. I have to get my shot a little bit close, not like perfect, but they'll just fix it, and they'll just take over the rest of the work. And now, if they could just make a brawler that fixes my dodging, and my ball placement, and all that other stuff, then I would be like a pro player. Okay, so Meeple has low damage and a homing main attack, and that really doesn't sound too bad. There are definitely brawlers that can make that work if it was in their kit, but I think Meeple has other problems on their main attack that really cause people to like not enjoy playing this brawler a lot. And the first thing is going to be range. Meeple seems like they should be a sniper brawler, but they're really more close to like a mid-range brawler. Think of something like Maisie, and this is a big problem because Meeple also has a sniper's reload speed. It takes forever to reload your 3 shots. So you have no range, you have a super long reload speed, and you have very low damage. And I think this is the big problem with Meeple. There is nothing about their main attack that excels other than homing your main shot. Like low damage, low range, long reload. You are not going to be doing a lot of damage as this brawler for the most part. And then in my opinion, this is the thing that makes Meeple very unfun. It causes you to play super slow because, you know, you're just not having a lot of ammo a lot of the time, and you're not picking up a lot of kills because your damage is so low. In fact, you need your teammates to either do a little chip damage or to finish off your kills for you a lot of the time because Meeple just doesn't have it in them. Now, again, I do think the homing mechanic is very cool, and there's a couple of things they could change about the main attack that would actually fix this brawler quite a bit, and we'll talk about that at the end of the video. We're just going to move on right now, but just know right now, the main attack is not good at all.
Losing to a noob.
All right, so next up, let's talk about Meeple's super. Now, in my opinion, I do like the mechanics of this super. It's very cool, but I'll be honest, it doesn't feel as game-changing as it should. Like, when you hear about what it does on paper, you'd be like, whoa, that super is amazing. That's crazy. And then you play it in the game, and it's kind of just like whatever. It kind of just exists. And it does come in handy from time to time, but for the most part, it's just kind of there. All right, so real quick, if you don't know, what the super does is that if you put it on top of a wall, it'll allow you and your teammates to shoot through that wall. It doesn't do any damage. It doesn't do any knockback. It doesn't heal any teammates. All it does is let you shoot through that wall. And if you don't put it on top of a wall, it doesn't do anything. So you're out of luck there. So like I said, on paper, this sounds like a very overpowered super, and there's definitely situations where it can be. For example, it'll allow you to target tanks and throwers that are hiding behind walls, and it can even allow you to pick up a kill when an enemy's trying to run away. So it's definitely got its uses in certain situations. But the super also has some severe limitations as well. For example, it's not going to help Meeple a lot on real open maps where they're already going to struggle to begin with, so that kind of sucks. And it also loses a ton of value if you play with brawlers that have wall breaks. For example, like Colt, Brock, Dynamite, those types of things. people who are going to open up the maps, you're going to lose value on your super to begin with. But in my opinion, the worst thing about this super is that it takes 5 shots to charge it up. And like I said earlier, Meeple has a very long reload speed. So it feels like you only get 1 or 2 supers per match. And that makes it feel very, very like unimpactful. Like you'll have the super up, and then it's gone, and then you have to charge up a whole nother one with your long reload speed and all that, and it just feels like you never have a super, like, when you need it. Now, in my opinion, I don't think this super is impactful enough to justify having 5 shots to charge it up, while also having an extremely long reload speed on the brawler. It just feels like that's overkill to limit how many supers you're going to get on this brawler. I think a really good comparison brawler here is going to be Maisie. Now, like I said earlier, Maisie's kind of similar to Meeple in that, you know, she has very similar range to Meeple. She's going to do a little bit more damage. Her reload speed is going to be a little bit quicker. But the thing I really want to emphasize is that Maisie only takes 4 shots to charge up her super, so that's an entire shot less, and that is a much more impactful super on a game. It can get like whole team wipes and stuff, which is a lot more impactful than Meeple being able to shoot through walls for a couple of seconds. And that requires a whole extra shot on a long reload speed brawler. Now, I do want to say I do like this super. I'm not trying to totally hate on it. I do think it does offer some neat utility, and Meeple's homing mechanic can take advantage of it quite a bit. So it is like, you know, in a vacuum, very good. But like I said, Meeple's kit right now is not like set up to take good advantage of it. It takes way too long to reload your shots. It takes way too long to charge up your super. And then on top of that, you're not doing a ton of damage to begin with. So everything in Meeple's kit just kind of feels like it doesn't gel very well right now. In my opinion, you have to play this brawler way too slow to take any advantage of any of this stuff. And yeah, I'm just not a big fan of it right now. But like I said, we're going to talk about fixes at the end. I got one more thing I want to mention real quick.
The meta is clearly broken.
All right, so the whole time I was pushing Meeple, the only thought I had in my head the entire time was basically, what does this brawler do well, and why would I want to play them? Now, this sounds really mean to say. It sounds like I'm hating on the brawler, but I'm being realistic here. Like, right now, they get outranged by every single sniper in the game pretty much. So, like, why would I ever want to play them over Piper, Mandy, Belle? If it's like a long range map, like why would I pick up Meeple in those situations? Because they're just going to get outranged and they're going to get countered by snipers and you're not going to have a good time. Then on top of that, you're also just going to struggle into tanks and assassins because your damage is so low and your reload speed so high, you just don't have the DPS to deal with them. Like, when a Primo jumps on top of a Meeple, the only thing they can do to save themselves is to use the Rage Quit gadget. And other than that, you're just a sitting duck. Like, they could just have their way with you, and it's bad. So you're left kind of playing to compete with mid-range brawlers, and again, Meeple just doesn't have the damage to keep up with some of those, like Amber, or Clancy, or Maisie, like I said earlier. Like, there's other mid-range brawlers that are just way better than Meeple, and again, why would you ever want to play this brawler? They're probably a bottom 10 brawler in the entire game, if I'm being totally honest. Now, I'm not saying Meeple is unplayable by any means, but I am trying to say that, like, when I queued into a match playing as Meeple, when I looked at the other team, I never thought, yes, I can easily handle this brawler. That's a good matchup for me. I want to lane against them. Even against throwers, which on paper should be a good matchup for Meeple, it didn't go well for me because it took so long to get my super down the first time, and then once I put it down, they just move away, and then I'm stuck trying to charge another super just to keep them off of the wall they were hiding behind. So, in general, it's just like, there's no good matchups for Meeple, like I said. However, I will admit that I'm not exactly the most knowledgeable about this type of stuff because, like, it's just too many brawlers to keep track of about, like, hard counters and soft counters and all that stuff. I used to care about it back when there was, like, 40 brawlers in the game. Now that there's 80, I can't be bothered. So, if you disagree with me on this point, let me know down in the comments. Let me know what brawlers you think Meeple can handle, and then we'll all learn something together. But right now, I just have a hard time seeing where Meeple fits into the roster.
Nat 21!
Okay, so we talked about Meeple and all their struggles and what I do and don't like about them. So, I don't want to just sit here and complain about the brawler. I want to see what should be buffed about them, or at least what I would change if it was up to me. Like if Supercell called me or DM'd me, I would tell them what I would buff. So we're going to do that in this video right now. So I think the first thing everyone wants to point at and say fix this is going to be the reload speed. I think people hate the long reload speed, but in my opinion, I think it's perfectly fine because the homing shot mechanic is on this brawler. And I feel like if you had a fast reload speed and a homing shot, it would be very toxic to play against. So I think the long reload speed is intentional, and I actually think it's perfectly fine on this brawler as long as you keep the homing mechanic. Now, if you get rid of the homing mechanic, then you can buff the reload speed. But as it is right now, I would not touch the reload speed at all. Next up is going to be damage, and I would absolutely say that Meeple needs a damage buff because right now Meeple does not offer like any DPS because of the low damage and long reload speed. And if you're not going to buff the reload speed, then you got to buff the damage. So I would 100% agree that Meeple needs a big damage buff. Now, to me, I would like to see Meeple do about 3,000 damage per shot. 2,900, 3,000 damage seems like a good number. That would be like a 12 to 15% damage buff. And to me, that would help Meeple actually carry their own weight in terms of damage to a team. And like I said, Meeple doesn't have like the most impactful super. Like the super isn't going to do damage. The super isn't going to do any knockback or any of that type of stuff. So allowing just to shoot through walls and do a decent amount of damage seems fair to me. So big damage buff for Meeple is like the first thing that I would address. Next up is going to be the main attack range, and in my opinion, if you buff the main attack damage, then you don't actually need to buff the main attack range. And this is because, to me, the pain point is the fact that, like I said earlier, Meeple doesn't really fit anywhere. They can't compete with mid-range brawlers to actually like do enough damage to justify a pick over any of the other ones, and they get hard countered by snipers, and that's a problem because like if you're not competing with mid-range brawlers and you're getting hard countered by snipers and tanks, what are you here for? But if you give them a damage buff, they'll at least be able to compete with some of the mid-range brawlers on certain maps and stuff like that. So they'll definitely be viable in certain situations, and they won't necessarily need to compete with those sniper brawlers all the time. And finally, we got to do something about this super, because right now the super is okay. It's a fun mechanic, but it just doesn't do enough to justify anything about it. First off, obviously, you already know what I'm going to say. We need to lower that charge rate by 1. Make it so you get your super in 4 shots. That way, getting your first super is not such a chore. It'll still be a little difficult, but it'll be manageable. And you'll actually be able to put down a lot more supers throughout a match. It won't just be 1 or 2. It'll be like 4 or 5, which will be nice. And next off, and I know this might be a bit of a hot take, but I think they need to add a knockback to the super. Doesn't need to be like the craziest knockback, but it's got to be something, in my opinion. And I know, again, this is a hot take, but hear me out here. So like I said earlier, Meeple struggles with these tanks and assassins matchups, and a damage buff would help address that a little bit, but they're also still going to have a long reload speed, so it's not like a perfect solution. And yes, the Rage Quit gadget can help address these matchups as well, but you only get a couple uses of that per match, and like I said, I don't feel like there's a ton of utility other than shooting through walls on this super, so a knockback just kind of makes sense in my opinion. It would give Meeple a better matchup against tanks and assassins, add a little bit of utility to the super, and on top of that, it just feels like it should fit. I'll be honest, they could replace the reload speed buff star power with this, and I would be perfectly happy with that solution, but this is just what I would do personally. So right now, in my opinion, Meeple feels like an extremely underwhelming brawler. They aren't like terrible, like they're not like extremely unplayable, and they're a little unfun because of the long reload speed and stuff like that, but they are definitely the worst option across every brawler in the entire roster, and that's not even close in my opinion. Like they just feel like one of the worst brawlers to ever come out. Like I said, there's fun things in Meeple's kit. For example, the homing attacks. I really like that because it fixes my bad aim, and being able to attack through walls with the super is very interesting, and I like that mechanic, but everything in Meeple's kit just feels like it's very underwhelming for a reason, and that's because they gave this brawler away for free, so they couldn't have it being overpowered like they did with Buzz Lightyear. Honestly, I'm hoping to see some buffs come to this brawler very soon, because this brawler is extremely underwhelming, like I've said many times already in this video, and I would like to see what they actually look like when they're actually like buffed up and strong and viable in the game, because right now it just feels like they have no place. And if you haven't bought them for pizza yet, I would probably recommend skipping them if you're okay with not picking up this brawler, because like honestly, they don't do anything great, and I don't think they're a must-play by anything, like by any means or anything like that. Anyway, let me know what you think about Meeple down in the comments. Let me know if you like really like them a lot, and if I'm missing some things about them, or if you agree with anything I said, let me know about that as well. But that's gonna do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed my yapping. If you did, make sure you leave a like on the video, and if you're new, consider dropping a sub as well. But I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.